Live. Welcome. This is Thursday afternoon, March 11th, Senate Government Operations Committee. We've been discussing a rather shortened agenda for the day. So we're going to do two things, really. We're going to listen to an amendment proposal by Senator Parent on our S15. I think it's S15, right? The Elections Bill. He has an amendment to show us. We'll discuss that. Then later, we're going to talk with Michelle Childs from the Legislative Council about what we've done so far around cannabis and whether or not we're prepared to sort of finish up that job in terms of what our committee is going to do around the cannabis bill. The cannabis bill, as you know, is in the Judiciary Committee. We've been asked to take a look at it. We've decided to make a couple of changes to it, none of which are particularly dramatic, I don't think, but Michelle's going to go over them with us. She has drafted some language that she wants to go over with us. Now, she got brought to the call to the House Representatives a couple of minutes ago, so we're not exactly sure when she'll be back. But we'll do our best to wait for her to come back and then talk through the amendment she wrote for the cannabis bill. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So Virginia, I know you're probably here to talk about representing dispensaries and whatnot. So you just can be patient and wait and hope that Michelle said she wouldn't be gone long, but you never know when things are on the floor.
Okay, thank you, Senator.
So let's turn to Senator Parent and Amren's here as well to go through the amendment. Is that okay, Amren?
Yes, for the record, Amren Amerjali, Legislative Council.
So,
Senator
Corey, do you want to say anything before we walk through it?
No, I think we had our discussion on the purpose, and Amren and I tried to do our best to put that into language last night. So I'll let her go through it and then be here if you have any questions as to what my thinking was in drafting it this way.
Okay.
And is everyone able to see the draft amendment? It's posted to
it's
the
on
committee's
our
webpage.
It's on the
I've got
website.
it.
Okay, perfect. So this amendment would amend the strike all amendment that the committee is recommending for S15. Specifically, a first amendment within Section 3, which is the Australian ballot system section for local elections under Title 17. And this would, I believe, okay, this version does not have a highlight. So the present strike all amendment that the committee voted out has G1, 2, G1, 2, 4, and 5. And this amendment would insert a new subsection 3 at the bottom of page 1 to say that any municipality that has voted to apply the Australian ballot system but did not vote to mail its annual or special meeting ballot to all active registered voters shall mail an absentee ballot request form to all active registered voters. The remainder of subsection G remains the same as the strike all amendment that this committee voted out.
So,
and I added this piece in. I brought it up briefly yesterday. It wasn't a piece, but while we do this study and go on, I know we did these postcards last year at the primary, and this is in light of that, because while we're waiting for a response from the study committee, I still want to try to make access to these elections a little bit easier. And I think giving people at least the opportunity to remind them that there's an election, they can request an absentee, is the least we can do and doesn't really change anything.
But I thought we were talking, I'm not being judgmental.
The study committees, the rest of it's the study committee, but I put this piece in as well.
But this piece doesn't necessarily relate to town meetings.
Nope, it's any election.
This relates to all the elections.
Yep, that where we have Australian ballot, that you have to just mail voters the ability to request an absentee ballot.
I think it's a good reminder with how confusing these next couple of years will be, particularly with the primary two. I mean, it's just like we're confusing people, and we should. Yeah. It's like putting up the orange flags on the side of the new stop sign. Like, we need to give people some transition time at the very least.
Yeah, and the way I look at it, we all know that every election is different. We know the primaries are party elections. We know town meeting day or local elections. We know the general election's a general election. The average voter just sees it as an election, on all of them. So I'm, the study committee is the rest of it, but I think this is just one piece. I don't.
Well, tell me how life would be different with this piece.
Well, this is what we did for the primary, and we saw increased primary turnout this summer. We mailed people. We're not mailing them a ballot. So people who are concerned about mailing ballots, you're not doing it. You're also starting to build the ability for town clerks to get you, because a lot of this is just them seeing and doing the work. And I think by mailing the absentee request, people can mail it back and get their ballot. They can choose to go in, but we're not mailing them the ballot, so you don't have as expensive of a cost. But also, too, what I find really helpful in a lot of this, and what my town clerks have found helpful in mailing these and ballots, is cleaning up their checklist. There's a lot of people that they can't find. And so this is just another tool in that. So again, the goal of this bill in my mind is to make it easier to vote. And this is just a small step in making it easier to vote.
So the bill that we've been moving forward with would have us do mail-in voting for the general elections, the statewide elections, but not the primaries, but just at statewide. Right, Amran, is that true?
Yes.
So this would extend the use of the encouragement of the absentee ballots to other elections, meaning the primary elections and potentially town meeting elections?
This specifically is around all local elections, because the
goal here is, we could eventually build it, but I think to belabor, I think we just want to increase access, especially local. We're heading down this path.
Right.
So, this isn't to me the guts of the amendment, but this is just also keeping pressure in my mind on us as legislators that after this study comes in, we actually do something with it.
Right.
But like, Senator Rahm said, my biggest fear is you're going to confuse voters with this bill without doing what I really want to do, but I understand I don't have the support necessarily of the committee to do that. I think we're going to be saying overall, this was a mistake at some level, and we're going to have to do a lot of fixing it in future years, but that's okay. We'll have a study committee to tell us how to fix it.
So,
Allison?
so Corey, with this adding number 3, you're saying that even if a town currently in the bill may choose to mail out its ballots, as they did this year at town meeting. Many towns did, as we discussed. And what you're saying here is that even if they've chosen with that option, which we know will be discussed pretty fully, and my guess is at select board meetings, if they actively choose not to mail out ballots, they have to mail out an absentee postcard requesting an absentee ballot.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's all this first piece does, is what I understand.
Yep.
Okay, I understand it better now, having heard you say that.
Okay.
It's more
thanks.
clear.
Okay, so that's
So they're not going to mail out ballots to everybody, but they have to at least do the mailing of the request for absentee ballots.
Yes.
Okay.
I like it.
Anything else on this particular piece before we move on?
No,
That's
that was
the-
the substance.
that's the first part of the amendment.
Yes. And moving to the second recommended amendment on page 2, this would add a new section 21A, because I did not want to renumber any other sections of the underlying amendment. So a new section 21A would create a voting access study committee. And the purpose of the study committee would be to evaluate how to expand Vermonters' access to statewide and local elections. Subsection B lays out the membership. The committee shall be composed of the following members: 2 members of the House, not from the same political party, who shall be appointed by the Speaker; 2 current members of the Senate, not from the same political party, who shall be appointed by the Committee on Committees; 3, 4 representatives of municipalities, including a representative of the Vermont League of Cities and Towns and the Towns Clerks Association. 4, 4 representatives representing the interests of voters, including a representative from the Vermont Public Interest Research Group, the Executive Director of Racial Equity or Designee, the National Vote at Home Institute or Designee, and a registered Vermont voter. And lastly, the Director of the Secretary of State's Elections Division or Designee. Should I pause for questions or continue? I will continue. Subsection
Sometimes I
C.
would just say, sometimes there are some people who don't like the idea of listing names of organizations in bills. I don't necessarily feel that way, but there are definitely times when we've done that. People have said, well, you shouldn't list them by name. I'm not sure why, but I just say that that's something that might come up in some people's minds. Senator Collmore?
Thank you, Senator Polino. I agree. I mean, if you start putting VPIRG in, why not the League of Women Voters? Or, you know, there's a whole host of other organizations that you could put in there. There's got to be a better way to phrase that than to specifically call out, however it's worded here. That's just my view.
Yeah, I'm not convinced either way, but I think, Brian, you make a good point. I mean, because it's happened to me in the past when we put organizational names on things. Could say, you know, 4 people representing voters or whatever that says, the interest of voters appointed by, well, I was going to say, you know, it comes down to either the governor or the pro tem or the speaker, but somebody, you have to appoint those people.
Yeah, I think just here I was trying to just get to some kind of balance quickly.
Yeah, no, I think what you did
The
was
group-
fine, but it is fine. But I just think
The
some people may
appointee
not
I
think
was
so.
most interested in is getting the Director of Racial Equity and or
Right.
designee, because we didn't talk about it much yesterday, but I see this as much as a, you know, trying to figure out how to expand rights for, you know, Vermont, you know, minorities and groups that are under, you know, served in, you know, across the state of Vermont. And so if we can make sure there's a voice just at the table there, so that's where I was trying to get here. But again, this is a quick, you know, my goal is at least to get a study committee into this bill and then work with the House, obviously, to refine things. But
Sure.
you know, how do we address things going forward?
Well, I'm not necessarily proposing we take those names out. I'm just raising it as a flag because other people may decide they want to take it out. So I just want to make sure that we're aware of that.
Yep, so noted.
What was the, I'm sorry, before you move on, what was the thing we were talking about the other day with Secretary of State's office when they said they had drafted language that we were talking about? It wasn't this, right? It was something else. Okay.
It was Joe Bennings.
Joe
Bennings.
Oh, right. Okay, right. We haven't heard back from him yet. Okay, move on.
Subsection C on page 3, powers and duties. The committee shall study the ways Vermont can increase its residents' access to statewide and local elections, including examination of the following issues. First, whether town meeting day should be moved to a weekend or made a state holiday. Second, whether universal vote by mail should be required for municipalities that vote to apply an Australian ballot system. Third, whether universal vote by mail should be required for Vermont's general and primary elections. I kept it as general just in case the only thing that comes out ultimately is this study committee. I didn't want to exclude general elections on the assumption that the remaining underlying bill will pass. Fourth, whether universal vote by mail for statewide or local elections increases access to voting among Vermonters who are Black, Indigenous, or people of color, or among populations or communities with historically low voter, voter turnout.
Can I just say something about that? So I get definitely what the attempt is here. There's some difference between low voter turnout and being disenfranchised from voting. So, you know, it's just, I don't want it to be tagged that BIPOC people just have low voter turnout. They have a history of having their vote suppressed and having been disenfranchised. So I don't know if we want to say those who have been disenfranchised from the vote and those with historic low voter turnout, but I just wouldn't want it to, I think Corey gets what I'm saying. Like, I just don't want to act like BIPOC people haven't voted.
But we could change the language a little bit. Would you take out the words Black, Indigenous, or people of color and just substitute what you said for those words?
I think that's fine. Those who have been disenfranchised from voting, or those with historic low voter turnout. Historic low voter turnout is like students. If I'm just saying it on the record, right?
Right.
It's young people, they haven't been.
Young people are just, yeah. I think I would take out.
Category, yeah.
I
But
would take out racial.
Yeah.
I'm open to that. Again, the point is, I just want to make sure we're increasing access to all groups and look at what the impediments have been for these groups and why they don't vote. And it might be because, as Senator Rahm said, because we've made it really hard for them to vote and, made it, so on. So yeah, that's fine with me if you guys want to make those changes.
So I'm sorry, but Keisha, could you just say those again, the phrase you had?
Those who have historically been disenfranchised from voting,
right?
And populations that have historically had low voter turnout.
Yeah, without getting rid of the specific race references.
Getting rid of those race references.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Doing it or doing it? I just heard two things.
I thought we were saying we would take your phrase and put it in there and eliminate the words Black, Indigenous, or people of color.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think that is much better.
Okay.
When you say that we're going to get the Secretary of State's help, we don't list the Secretary of State as being a member of this committee, I don't think. And it needs to be.
It is at the top of page 3, subdivision 5.
Oh, okay. And the director of this. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I was missing that.
So subsection D Assistance, the committee shall have the administrative, technical, and legal assistance of the Secretary of State's office and the Office of Legislative Counsel. And then on page 4, there is a report requirement on or before July 1st, 2022. The committee shall submit a written report to the House and Senate Committees on Government Operations with its findings and any recommendations for legislative action.
And just so you guys know, I chose the timing, knowing the groups yesterday. I don't buy the argument that it's going to take them the next year and a half to get ready for next 22 election, because we just did the 22 election in 2020 with 4 months run up. But 2, if we don't have a study, if we do a study in the fall, it's going to be right before the election. They're going to complain about that. If we don't have a study ready to go by 23, we're not going to be able to do this until 25, just with election changes. So that to me was just too long. So in my mind, this gives them a year, a little bit longer than a year, to do a study.
Yeah, and we're giving them a new position, which I feel that's kind of referenced yesterday.
Yeah, then they kind of were saying, we don't have the bandwidth to do this. I mean, I don't buy it.
Yes, ma'am.
Which of the many ma'ams? Would
Senator
that be
Clarkson.
me?
Senator Clarkson.
Okay. I just, in July of 2022, Corey, ideally no one's going to be around. I absolutely understand that we want to take it up first thing in January, because that January 23 that 23 session is when we can change election law. So in that next biennium, but July, it doesn't give them any chance to benefit and profit from what we learned in the election of 22. So I hate to suggest this, but I would suggest that it be due December 15th, because then it could benefit from everything they learn with their second rollout and anything we might have learned with the town meeting stuff. So
I'm fine with that. I just was trying to be a little sensitive to that. I felt they were going to push back on the time whenever we made it.
Yeah,
so,
I think they will, but we need this. You're absolutely right. We need this in pocket by January of 23.
Right.
So-
And so I was just, I
Right.
threw a dart at honestly at the wall and said, this is one where it's a few months after town meeting and it's really before we get into the hot and heavy of the election. But I don't disagree with your point. If you're comfortable asking them to have a final report in December, I certainly am.
Yeah.
What about
I think
December
this-
1st, Allison?
Well, given the general elections the first week of November, I'd suggest the 15th.
Okay.
We don't
Okay.
technically need it until January 1st. But if we get it, ask it to be done by December 15th, then they get it done before the holidays hit.
That's a good idea. Yep.
So I would be fine with that.
Okay, great.
Moving on to subsection F on page 4, meetings. The director of the Secretary of State's Election Division shall call the first meeting of the committee to occur on or before August 15th, 2021. The committee shall select a chair from among its members at its first meeting. A majority of the membership shall constitute a quorum, and the committee shall cease to exist on July 1st, 2022, which would need to change if you are
Right,
changing the date.
till the 15th.
Okay. Compensation and reimbursement for attendance at meetings during adjournment of the General Assembly. A legislative member of the committee serving in his or her capacity as a legislator shall be entitled to per diem compensation and reimbursement for not more than 8 meetings. These payments shall be made from monies appropriated to the General Assembly.
Was there a reason for 8, Corey?
No, I was just timing out how often I thought they would meet in a year, 2-year time piece. And I find I've been on these study committees where like 5 meetings is probably not enough. But again, it was just trying to get, I fully expect the House to vet this and, this process. I get this an amendment. This is coming late. I think it just needs to be a toehold in there that we expect it to grow. But, my thought was I didn't think it needed to be monthly, but, fairly regularly to get, this done. I think there's a lot we're asking them to consider, and, they're gonna have to collect data and,
Okay, thank you.
And then subdivision 2, members of the committee representing municipalities. What that actually probably should be amended a bit. Members of the committee representing municipalities and the interests of voters shall be entitled to per diem compensation and reimbursement of expenses as permitted under 32 VSA section 1010 for not more than 8 meetings. These payments shall be made from monies appropriated to the Secretary of State's office.
which I'm sure he won't like either, but
No, why would that be the case? Why?
put it there. I mean, this part would probably get stripped out if it was going to a propes anyway, and they'd figure it out. So it's hammering. So
But study committees are usually paid for by the legislature.
but it's the Secretary of State's goal to increase voter participation.
It may well be, but
Right.
it's
Doesn't
unusual.
mean they want to spend their own money doing it.
We're
It's
giving them a whole,
unusual for,
we're giving them a whole position for somebody who has to do something every other year.
no, hopefully they're working all the time.
I actually think it would be funny to leave it in. See if he even picks up on it.
Well, if I picked up on it, he'll pick up on it.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, and obviously it looks like we'll have a substitute amendment if you support the concept. To me, is we got to get the study committee so that when we come back in 23, we can have the true thoughtful discussion. And I get amendments, unfortunately, when they come in late in the process like this, are never as well as having the committee process do it. But at least I think the importance of adding it now is letting the House know that we do want to address this, and please take a deeper look that we, unfortunately just didn't take a look. And then they're going to send a revised bill back, as my guess, and then you guys can take a little deeper dive then and clean up the language a little bit. I by no means expect this to be the final language of the study committee, but
Well,
I think we want to make sure it's in there.
I agree. I also think going back up to the other part of the amendment, when we talk about mailing out the absentee ballot forms and whatnot, there'll be discussion about what the form should look like. Should the Secretary of State design it? There'll be those kinds of questions as well.
Yeah.
So that you don't have different towns doing different forms, different ways of going about it. You want to make it uniform, I would presume. Any other questions, comments, ideas?
No,
I just, yeah, this is a question I think for Probst, but I'm not sure we can appropriate the Secretary of State's money. We can only appropriate our own money. I mean, I'm not sure we can
Tell somebody else to pay
spend
for
our
something.
money, but I'm not sure. I just don't know if we have the authority to do that.
Well, especially because the Secretary of State, it says, shall be made from monies appropriated to the Secretary of State's office. We don't really appropriate money to
No,
the
we
Secretary
don't.
of State's
No.
office. They're self-funded.
Mm.
Well,
we
mostly
should
they
change,
are.
we should change that to the general fund.
Anyway,
Yeah,
I
we should,
think
even though it
that's
would be fun to keep it in, I think
Yeah.
that we don't appropriate money to the Secretary of State's office unless I'm missing something.
and we don't usually appropriate money for study committees. That happens, and we add it all up at the end of the.
That's
you know,
what I
they're-
figured. I don't know if it made sense just to remove the money section at this piece because approps would anyway. But we'd still just,
Oh, you know what else? Because also it's an amendment that Jeanette, correct me if I'm wrong, but Jeanette's been to appropriations to talk about this bill. And if we put this in here with appropriation involved in it, appropriation is going to want to take it back off the floor and like add up these
Well,
numbers.
Any
That's a good
study
point.
committee that directs that people are paid is an assumed appropriation. So anyway, we can ask Jane. If we decide to do this, Jeanette can have a sidebar with Jane, or one of us can.
Or the House can put it back in.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
it's
I should take it out.
customary, I thought it was customary for someone proposing an amendment that was found favorable by the policy committee to then go to the money committee and ask
Yeah,
for
yeah.
a vote as well.
Or the reporter, either one.
Okay. I'm just learning. I was like, I thought we could still have a bill that has an appropriation, but it would
Yeah.
have a step.
Just channel Obi. We can do whatever we want.
Right.
Mike Obohosky.
The
So,
good old
yeah.
days. Well,
Sorry.
I would
Is that what,
I would-
Anthony?
well, I would just say that I don't think I think the committee feels like we shouldn't vote on this without having the chair at least be a part of the conversation.
Oh,
which-
absolutely. I mean, she's
which would be
not just
not-
the.
This is her bill too. So we're not going to vote on it today.
is the bill gonna be on the floor then tomorrow?
No, we're going to pass. Well, unless Jeanette has a miracle recovery and comes in raring to go.
So
Yes,
it sounds
it's-
like to me might make sense is to ask Ameren to make a few of the slight changes we had and then consider it a substitute amendment and then of this amendment. You know, I just was trying to get one in the calendar today thinking we were going on the floor tomorrow.
Right.
So it's
No,
kind of
that was a good thought.
a rush. But I think if it looks like we're not taking this up to early next week, certainly happy to you know, maybe grab someone on this committee too that I can work with to clean up some of the language and just make it a little smoother just to get that foothold in the bill to send to the House.
Because if worse came to worse, time-wise, you could always just present this on the floor.
Right.
So that could work just as well. I mean, I think it'd be better to incorporate it into the bill if that's what we want to do, but
Yeah, I do too. And I would hope to have your support because usually with people in my party, when we present things on the floor without the committee's support, it doesn't go very far.
yeah,
Well,
I know the feeling.
so Ameren, if you're able to make these changes in the amendment and send it to Jeanette tonight, she may be slowly recovering from her second vaccination. So she might be able to actually look at it tonight. And in
I
case
did
she
send her
does,
an email earlier today and she did not respond. But that was earlier today. She might be ready to respond this
yeah.
evening. So you can do that, Emily,
Yes, I can.
and send us a copy.
The only thing I wasn't certain about was where we landed with the funding piece.
I
I
would
don't know, you
boldly
guys. I mean, with the time, I'd almost remove because I feel like approach just removes that stuff anyway. So we might as well just say, hey, we didn't put it in this, and I can say on the floor, we didn't put any of that in this amendment just to avoid that piece, and we knew it would be removed, but, something we'd likely, as this works through the process, we'd be asking, could happen.
I'm fine leaving it out.
Leaving it out?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be
So-
okay with leaving it out. I mean, people like VPIRG, or those kinds of organizations, they're going to be sending staff people anyway, I would think, or board members, people who are not going to need to be reimbursed necessarily.
So are we talking about taking out 1 and 2 at the bottom of the page? Or are we just talking about taking out 2?
1 and 2. Again, I think the House can put it back in if they want, and I don't know that we need to worry about it. And we didn't really decide about whether to put specific groups in it yet either, like VPIRG and.
Right.
Well, I think that's a discussion with Jen. I would say that you can't really have a study committee without having the per diems identified. I hear what you're saying. I would feel more comfortable leaving 1 in and taking 2 out. But it's,
Sure. No, that'd be okay.
All right.
I mean, legislators need a per diem, and because they are not paid by anybody else to be there, and this is their work. And yeah, everybody else, it's their job generally, of the other people who've been identified.
So we're taking out 2, but we're leaving in 1.
I would propose that.
I would second that.
I would third it.
Sure.
And we could have the discussion about what those groups are when we talk with Jeanette.
Sure. I mean, I'm not, like I said, I'm not opposed to having the named organizations.
Yeah.
I just think that sometimes it opens up a can of worms with people.
Yeah, I don't
Well,
like
yeah, I think it's actually a relatively representative group, but anyway, and actually Will Senning
Oh,
and Carol
yeah,
might have.
League of Women Voters. I don't know. That's a good suggestion. In fact, they do a lot of voter outreach. They just sent me actually 4 pamphlets in other languages about how to vote in Vermont. It's very nice.
It's so interesting because they have such a non-presence in our neck of the woods. So I think they must be very active in Washington and Chittenden County. But
That could be. They heard me say something about language access for voting and mailed me all their little pamphlets. So I don't know.
Lila is so good. She's so good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, again, this was just Amber and I just trying to think of groups quick last night that,
Yeah, I think it's a good start, and it's gotten us thinking about it. So that's good.
Yeah, that was my goal. And like I said, I get amendments a lot of times coming at the end. We didn't have the debate over the people like we would on a normal study committee, but this still has a little ways to go through the process. This is just its first iteration to just get a placeholder. And I think it, sends the message we're serious about actually increasing voter participation across all elections, not just one.
Good.
Great. I think this is good. And Amber, if you could send this off to Jeanette. Now I'll call Jeanette when we're done and just see how she is and give her a heads up it's coming, or Anthony, you can.
You can call her. That's fine. I have another meeting. I got 2 more Zooms to do before the day is over. I'm really late. Well, yesterday I was so zoomed out. I was like a vegetable by the time I was done. I had to go to a city council meeting, and I mean, it just tears your brain out.
Yeah.
I know. I've been on Zooms like the last couple days till 8:30 at night. It's been too much. It's too much.
I was very glad to be able to skate last night and referee.
Oh, how great. Was it a ref? Were you reffing?
I have to run. I'm sorry.
All right. Thank you
I'll be
very
in
much for
touch.
coming.
Yes, Allison, I'm too old to play.
I left my house for the first time in a week today for like a half an hour.
Yeah.
Drive around
It's
the block.
very strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was really beat yesterday.
I bet. but it must have been invigorating to be back skating.
Oh, no, yeah, no, it woke, I didn't get home till almost 11, but it was nice. I drove right through Woodstock. I thought of you. I was on my way to Hartford.
You just let, I wish you'd let me know when you're playing games in my neck of the woods, because I'd actually come and watch them.
Brian, do they wear masks?
Oh yeah, everybody had to wear a mask. And we have an electronic whistle. We can't blow the whistle anymore because it throws
All
the
right.
virus in the air, supposedly.
Well,
It does. Well, it's why people.
I'll head out. Although I enjoy being part of your committee.
Sorry, Corey.
Thanks a lot, Corey.
I didn't mean
Have
to.
I think I might be. So the other one thing I'll notice is I think I might be the only senator who serves on a committee without a female senator all day long. I'm on 2 committees that are all male senators. So.
Oh my God,
It's
institutions.
nice to get some
lost.
diversity.
I thought you were on education in the afternoon.
Institutions.
Weren't you on education?
Last term.
Ah,
Well, good work. Thank you.
Yeah. See ya.
Thanks a lot, Corey.
thank you mucho. So without Michelle,
We could take a break and report back, come back in 10 minutes and see if she's here and then decide what to do. I mean, she seemed adamant about wanting to come back and go through it with us.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah,
Okay.
she had written me a note saying, just let me know when to come back. So I did just send an invitation to her.
so why don't we
Okay.
invite her back for like 3 o'clock? Is she available now?
Yeah. So I'll just let her know 3 o'clock works.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
We'll go stretch our legs.
Right. Welcome back to Senate Government Operations Committee, Thursday, March 11th. We're going to have a discussion with Michelle Childs from Legislative Council about some of the proposed changes the committee is considering to the Cannabis Bill. Cannabis Bill is S25, if I remember correctly, right? So go ahead, Michelle, just take us through, actually, make sure we got the paper.
Yeah, I just emailed it. Sorry, I didn't
I got it.
do that earlier. Y'all are my 5th committee today, so I'm sometimes I get a little confused about what I've sent where.
You've saved the best for last.
Yes. And Gail, can I share my screen?
We can look at it here if you've emailed it to us.
We can just look at
I
our,
have whatever your preference is.
Yeah, we like just looking at our iPads or our
Oh,
computers.
okay. Well, that's fine with me. So I'm going to take you through this, and you'll see, it's not quite done. As I had mentioned to you a little earlier, I had drafted it, and then I had sent it to Senator White yesterday, but because she's sick, she wasn't able to take a look at it. So I'll clarify for you the areas where I still need some input from folks. So you should have, I should have updated the header, which I didn't, but what it says right now is draft 1.1, which I might, Gail, I'll connect with you because you probably have the 1.1 on the website now for me. So I need to change that draft number, but I'll correct it with you after we finish up.
Okay, that sounds good.
I've been having problems with the headers not automatically updating. Okay, so we're looking at, and I just put it in the form of an instance of amendment. Obviously, it's not an amendment because you don't have jurisdiction of the bill. But the first instance of amendment is, we've already talked about that, and I don't think we need to go over that, but that's your bit about the, if the towns don't vote by a certain date, then they need to, they're going to be considered an opt-in for retail sales. I did talk with Judiciary this morning a little bit about the amendments that you had already agreed to, and I did talk to them about this, and I'll probably make a little tweak to this. They brought up a concern that it sounds as though if the town doesn't vote exactly on March 8th, that would apply, and the intention is that if they haven't voted on or before, and so I'll just make a little technical tweak to that.
Sure.
An instance of amendment is on page 2.
Sorry, Michelle, may I just ask a question?
Sure.
So it's usually, so I see you're giving a little leeway after town meeting, because town meeting that year will be on the 1st of March.
Is it? It might be that that's what it was. I think what I
looked it up.
version was on that.
It's, town meeting is always the first Tuesday of the
Right.
of March.
So I
And
guess,
so-
Tucker had done this language, and so it might have been, and I wasn't in committee at that time when y'all were discussing it, so it might have been that you decided that you wanted a little time after, so I'll just put prior,
Yeah.
or I'll tweak
It
it,
may
but thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
And because
But
I have
Lori,
my,
that's a good thing though, right? We want it to be a little after town meeting.
I don't know if that's the intention. I mean, I'm happy. I think it's fine to be a little after. I just, if it's town meeting is on the 1st.
right, and I know what your intent is, so I'll fix it and take care of it, so don't worry. Also,
Senator-
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go
Actually,
ahead.
Allison, I think you're incorrect. I have the 2023 calendar open.
Yeah.
Town meeting day is on March 7th in 2023.
So that's probably why he has the 8th there.
Ah, okay. So,
I knew he couldn't be wrong because I knew we talked about it.
yeah.
Right, so I would probably say something like, like prior, if they don't do, but I'll look at it and I'll clarify.
Long before, yeah.
Thank you, Brian. I was just getting around to clarifying the date. So frustrating to not find it.
Okay, let's move forward.
So the section 2, again, this is language that you've already looked at and said you were okay with. So it's requiring it's moving the board members from the advisory committee members from 12 to 13 with the addition of the representative from the dispensaries. That's in subsection H, and then right up above there in subdivision C4 is that the member could be removed for cause by either the remaining 2 members of the board or by a 2/3 vote of the advisory committee.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Also on this section on page 4, the advisory committee is supposed to be seated by May 1st of this year. And you guys have decided to put it at April 1st.
Huh.
So we don't have a board yet, but we may have an advisory board. And that the Secretary of Agriculture is going to convene the first meeting on or before the 15th. So the third instance of amendment is tweaking the section that is in S25 as introduced. But this portion only has the fee bit in it because I've done some additional sections that are dealing with the business development fund. So you'll see here is just that the control board is to propose a plan for reducing or eliminating license fees. And I highlighted this language because I know this is a difficult one for everybody, but the language that's in there now is used because that's the phrase that's used currently in the law with regard to in a number of different places around technical training and various other things in Act 164. I can make this whatever you want, but I wanted to hear from you specifically how you want that language to read, because I felt like I kind of got a lot of pieces, but I wasn't entirely, when I went to kind of put pencil to paper, I wasn't entirely clear on the scope of what you wanted this to be. I can come back. I can just walk you through the whole thing and then we can come back on these sticking points if that's,
Sure.
or we can talk about them each one.
Sure.
You want to go through? Okay. So then moving on to the fourth instance of amendment, this is creating a new chapter, chapter 39 in Title VII So right after you have a few other cannabis chapters now in Title VII. And that's where you have a general one for Cannabis Control Board. You have one for cannabis establishments. You have another for the medical program and dispensaries. And so this would be adding one for social equity programs. So we start out with a definition section. These weren't absolutely necessary to put that in there, but we're going to have to add on to definitions. So I wanted to hold the place from a statutory standpoint. Because we're going to have to add definitions like social equity applicant in there. So top of page 5, so a new section for the fund. So it's establishing the Cannabis Business Development Fund. You'll see subsection B, line 4, the fund is comprised of 3% of gross sales made by integrated licensees prior to October 15th, 2022. I chose that date because the retailers are begin to get licensed on October 1st. And so I thought that kind of is that. So the intention there, from my understanding, was that when it's the period prior to the other retail stores coming online and selling. And so I just picked that date, but you can make that date whatever you want. With a maximum contribution of $50,000 per integrated licensee. So there are, as you know, 5 current dispensary licenses. So there could be a maximum of 5 integrated licenses. And so you could potentially see $250,000 going into that fund from existing dispensaries. And then the second one is just monies allocated to the fund by the General Assembly. And so Senator White had discussed an appropriation. And again, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. She had thrown around a variety of numbers, and I realized that no matter what number you pick, it's going to appropriations and they'll pick their own number. So, you can
Would that keep it from crossover though?
No, it just has to be out of committee of jurisdiction.
Oh, that's right. It
has to be out of Senate Judiciary tomorrow, and then it'll go to finance, and then it'll go to appropriations.
Right. Okay. I should remember that.
That's okay. So you see subsection C on line 9. So the fund is to be used for the following purposes: to provide low interest rate loans and grants to social equity applicants to pay for ordinary and necessary expenses to start and operate a licensed cannabis establishment. And 2, to pay for outreach. This hasn't been edited, just a little FYI. So don't worry too much on the typos. And 2, to pay for outreach that may be provided or targeted to attract and support equity applicants. And then 3, necessary costs incurred in administering the fund. And so I'm using this term social equity applicants. And then there's obviously the question, who's a social equity applicant? And there's not a definition in there, but this goes to a section I'll get to in a moment, where you're tasking the advisory committee with coming up for the criteria for a social equity applicant. And then what they'll do is they'll recommend back to you, and then that'll get incorporated into this definition section in here.
I have a question.
I'm sorry.
Okay, when you talk about providing pay for ordinary and necessary expenses to start and operate a licensed cannabis establishment, when I hear the word establishment, I think of a store, a retail store. But
great mind.
Would this also include a grower, the cultivator, those kinds of things?
It does.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the word establishment does not mean that. But when I see that word, I think of a store.
I had the same question, Anthony.
It means any of the licensees, and it is defined in the cannabis chapter.
All right, that's what I thought. I figured you knew what you were doing.
I try. So section 988. So as we discussed earlier in the week, ACCD is to establish a program using funds from the Cannabis Business Development Fund for the purpose of providing financial assistance, loans, grants, and technical assistance to social equity applicants. So again, it's just kind of the framework for it, because on your last committee discussion around this, you were kind of like, well, let's just kind of ask ACCD to establish the program. We don't need to come up with all the bells and whistles and all the details at this point. And so this can obviously be expanded at any time if they would like. Section 5, this is where you're directing the advisory committee in consultation with the board to develop criteria for social equity applicants for a purpose of obtaining the loans and grants. And the question I had was, when do you want the board reporting back to the General Assembly for this? So, this just is one of the many kind of questions we have about a lot of the stuff around the cannabis thing is there's a lot of reporting back to the legislature, but we don't know how long y'all are going to be around this year.
Yes,
So what do
that's
you
a
think?
good.
Yeah, I don't know what to say.
That's two of us.
So I'll keep going and we can circle back.
Okay.
So, but Michelle, you're on line 7, right?
Yes.
So it looks like it says the advisory committee, not the board. Is it the board?
The advisory committee is developing the criteria
In
consultation with the board, but I just had the board reporting to you rather than the advisory committee. They're not state employee.
Right. No, I missed that piece.
Sure.
That's a good question. When are we expecting people to take it up and do anything with it? That's, I think, the question. I mean, you want the report before any debate and discussion and action might be possible. So, yeah, I think that's a question mark still.
Can we receive reports if the legislature is not in session?
Oh, we do all the time.
You can. You just aren't in session to be able to then enact the legislation that you would need. So you can certainly you can receive it. And then, you could put that that they do that, they report to you in the fall. And then when I think about because people, I'm just trying to think about if they're applying, nobody's going to be applying until the spring of next year. So if you did receive the information you needed in the fall, and just kind of right out of the gate in January, added in the criteria for the social equity applicants on, budget adjustment or whatever's moving early on, then, you could have that in place. Other than that, I just don't really, it's just really just like throwing a dart, in terms of trying to guess when you guys will be here. Will you be here in August or September or?
I think there are two things in play here. One is when we might be able to take action on it, and B, when we think with a cannabis control board and advisory board that haven't even met yet, haven't even been appointed yet, when they can actually be effectively up and running enough to do this work. So I think actually the later we give them, the better. But it also gives us an opportunity, and often the legislature committee, particularly in a non-election year, will meet in preparation before the session, and they could actually take action on stuff before the session starts. So
yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I was just saying if you make it late enough, so like November 1st, the committee of jurisdiction might be able to meet and actually take some action on it. But I think given that they haven't even formed themselves to do any of the stuff that they're supposed to do, and they have a lot of stuff they have to do before they get to this, I would say late October or November 1.
Yeah, I was actually I agree with everything you just said. And I was going to actually say December, because that's when people are beginning to think about returning to the State House or to the legislature. So
Middle of December. Yeah.
if you get a report in July or August, it's like you're at the beach, and like you don't really read the report that closely. And by the time December rolls around, you're thinking more about what your priorities are, what you're going to do when you get back to the state house and whatnot. So I would actually say sometime as late as could be December 1st or December 15th or something like that. Also, I think whatever we put in, the bill is going to move through the House again and all that. So there'll be time to change these dates.
So
We might
let's
have a
just
better
put-
idea when we're going to be around come, once May comes around.
Then let's go for your idea. Let's go with December 1st.
Well, go ahead.
Brian,
I thought, and maybe I've missed it, that we talked about revolving loans, but that's not in here anywhere.
We did, you're right.
Right,
We
I
need-
can add that, and because I'm not your economic development person, I don't know if I would just say a revolving loan fund or if there's certain language I use for revolving loan fund, but I can check.
Okay, thank you.
Or you could put some,
Keisha?
I mean, I just feel like Price is Right rules are better to start with, where you kind of do it before you might need it rather than wait and give people mentally a lot of time and then go, oh my gosh, we are going to be back in August or September. And we really could have acted on that otherwise. I know we're shortening their time frame to consider it, but I don't know. I just feel like we're losing a lot of time with
So you're
December.
saying if we were going to be here in August, we should have them do it in August as an example.
Yeah, and maybe we start with it on the early end so they start mentally thinking, well, they could, I don't know, just could we
Yeah.
even get together for a day if we think it's really critical for the rest of this work to happen, that we receive the report and make some decision. I don't know.
yeah, Michelle can speak to the amount of work that once they are even established and have met. I mean, it is unclear they will even have met before mid-April or May at the earliest.
Yeah.
I mean, they have a lot of rules to set in place, right? I mean, Michelle, they have a ton of work to do to get going. And right. And so
The board certainly does, and
Yeah.
because you've kind of looped in the advisory committee working with them, there is a really heavy lift, but I certainly understand what Senator Ron's talking about. And I mean, I would say that if you did do like a fall date, and then as we, let's say it's May and, the decision is to adjourn and come back in August and be here in August and September, there's certainly nothing that prevents you. I mean, there's going to be a constant dialogue between the General Assembly and the board, because there's so many moving parts on all of this stuff that you guys are going to have to work in partnership a lot. There's nothing that keeps you from saying, hey, we didn't think we were going to be here in September, but we are. Can you guys move that a little bit up on your to-do list and get us something so we can enact it for you in September? And do that. I mean, because it's going to be in their interest. They're going to want the clarity on it. So, I mean, that's an option. So you don't kind of hamstring them saying, well, get it done by, May 15th, when we don't really know, which is a pretty Herculean task, especially because with the delay in the board, remember the board, then once the board is seated, they still have to hire staff. And so there's, there's a whole thing. So I don't know whether or not that holds any appeal, is if you picked a fall date, but you have lines of communication. And if it did look that you were going to be back here in the fall, that you could see whether or not they'd be willing to present you with that information earlier. But
I think it's a shot in the dark anyway. So why don't we just say October 15th? I mean, I don't know. It's so arbitrary right now. They have so much work to do before they can even get to this.
Did you say October?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I'm
October
for that. That's good.
October 15th is a good round date after taxes are due, right? for those of us who extend often.
Okay. So is that October 15th?
Sure.
It'll get changed anyway. Trust me.
Okay.
Or Michelle has to go over to the house and they'll be like, why'd they set that date? And she
Right.
And we could go tell them we picked it out of a hat.
And just so you know, so staff prefers those earlier dates. We don't love getting reports in December because
Right.
people don't read them right away, and then they do, and then they put in their drafting requests, and it's the holidays, and we have a hard time getting a hold of people and all of that other kind of stuff. So we like to not push things to, ideally, I try to avoid ever writing something that I know is coming back to me to write up after November, because it's, we start, especially the second year of the biennium, where you have earlier drafting deadlines and folks have to, kind of hit the ground running in January. We like to kind of get things teed up a little earlier. So.
I hear that.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, my screen's frozen a little bit. Can you still see the draft?
Yeah.
It's not allowing me to scroll. Let me get out of it and then do it again and see if that'll help. Or let's see. Nope. Okay, well, my screen is frozen. Sorry about that.
Your mouse wasn't, but like you can't.
All right, I'm looking on it by your.
Yeah, it just won't, Oh, I guess I can just do that. Okay, okay, so I think what we are on 988. So, sorry, it's my mouse that's not working.
I think we have it on our emails anyway, Michelle.
Okay,
Yeah,
here we go.
We have
Okay.
it right here.
All right, great.
We're in the last thing, and
Yes. Oh, right. So we already did section 5. So appropriation. I hope I didn't make a big mistake here, but I don't know. I didn't know how much money to put in there, so maybe I probably should have gone lower, and then you could bumped me up. But there were lots of numbers that were kind of tossed out there by the chair at different points. So I don't know what you want to do in terms of the appropriation. You could wait and have Senate appropriations at that section, or you could put this in. You could with a number, knowing that they're going to change it.
I would leave it there and see what Jeanette thinks. And it's particularly if it's a revolving fund, it's slightly different than if it's a set fund, if it's a one-time expense or an ongoing. I think that it's unclear what should be put in there. So why don't we leave it for the moment and unless everybody has an idea.
I agree with Senator Clarkson.
Kind of a crapshoot.
Okay. So section 7 is the transfer of the medical program to the board from DPS several months earlier than is provided in current law. So those programs are supposed to shift over to the board March 1st of next year. And at that time, there's two new chapters that are regulating the registry and the dispensaries, and those take effect March 1st. And then as long as the board can catch up with the timeline, then they should have the rules completed by that time as well. And so March 1st is when the program will start operating under the new statutes and rules, but you can move them over earlier. It just means that when you move them, they're still going to operate under the existing old statutes and rules that were adopted by the Department of Public Safety, even though they're now will be governed by the board, if that makes sense. But I'm guessing you guys have had experience doing this in GovOps before. This is the first time I've ever done something like that. But my understanding is you guys have done this a few times. So
they would continue to operate under the old rules until the new rules are written, though.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we've done that a little bit.
Yep. So
In Ag too, yeah.
Yep.
Yep. And so I just have a placeholder there on the positions because I was waiting to hear from JFO. My understanding is that there's 3 positions that are dedicated to the medical marijuana program. But I just need a little information from them about that. And so I'll add that in.
So just
Sorry.
for reference, Michelle, the latest bill where we're moving positions from the Department of Health to the Department of Public Safety and the Division of the Department of Public Safety in the Division of Fire Safety is in our Rental Health and Safety Bill in Senate Economic Development S79. So if you want to see how David constructed that is,
sure. That's great.
that's the most current language on moving people from a department to another department.
That is great. We do. We're always checking with all the other attorneys to see who's doing
So,
it, and because no sense reinventing the wheel.
Absolutely not. So David can give you that.
Okay, that's good. I've been a lot of this stuff obviously is kind of stuff David works on more, but I know how busy everybody is, so I've been a little reluctant to be asking my colleagues to review my work here. But so subsection B is just what we talked about, which is the registry is just going to continue to be governed by Chapter 86 and Title 18 until those other statutes take effect on March 1st, and hopefully the new rules as well.
Good.
And then this repeal is there are 2 sections in Act 164 that talk about moving the program over on March 1st. And so I had to repeal those.
Okay.
So I think I have all the issues in here. Can you think of anything that you discussed that you wanted in here that I might have missed?
I think this is great. And if we come up with others, we have the House to lobby.
But wasn't there something, I agree, but wasn't there something that we skipped over a couple of minutes ago?
The dates, the positions.
I thought there was something that we just nodded our heads and said, well, we'll come back to it later. Now I'm not
Oh
sure.
yeah, I was going to come back to the highlighted stuff. I was just wondering if there was an issue or something that I didn't include in here that you thought maybe I.
No, I don't think so. I think this is good.
I think this is great.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think, so yeah, so going back to section 3 and the language that's on lines 12 and 13 is there for consistency with the current act, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the same as what's in there. And I know that probably what's going to be happening over the next couple of years certainly is kind of an evolution of some of these the identification of certain communities or individuals with respect to this program. And so you can say, for reducing or eliminating license fees, and then putting in there, whomever you want. The language that's just in there is just because that's what's already used.
Okay. Where is it used?
It is used in providing, I'd have to do a little search in there, but it's used around, I think, preferences and licensing. Although, you know what, let me see if I can pull up. Let me pull up. Oh, I can't. I don't want to show you that. I'm going to stop share just so you don't see all the other senators' secrets.
Gosh,
When you share, my video freezes up, so that's why I closed the video.
Oh, you can't see my screen right now, right?
No,
no, we're looking at the draft on your email that you sent us.
Yeah, that's why I don't need it to be shared. So that language is already in other sections of this same bill?
Yeah, I'm having a little trouble with my program, so it's not being very cooperative. Let's see if it'll let me do it.
Well, I don't know if it's like a thing
Yeah.
loading and I can just say what is like my contention with it. It seems, so one thing I'm confused about is it said individuals who have historically been impacted. So I thought we were trying to say individuals who come from groups that have historically been marginalized or impacted. Because I'm wondering if we actually mean they themselves, you know, had to have been impacted. And then what do we mean by impact? I understand there's a difference if they are someone who's been incarcerated versus somebody who, you know, who's Black, who might have grown up in a community that was constantly depleted by the over-incarceration of people related to cannabis prohibition and legalization and, you know, criminalization, I should say. So I'm just, if this language exists elsewhere, I think I have a problem with it there too. Anyone could say they've been impacted by cannabis prohibition. So I don't know where the intent was behind how we define that. That's what I'm struggling with.
But I think in the end, it almost has to have something to do with that individual, or it doesn't make any sense. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think what I hear you saying, I think, is that it's not necessarily like this person was impacted and went to jail, but this person is from a community that has been impacted, from which people may have gone to jail unjustly and whatnot. So it's more like they should be coming from licensing fees for individuals from communities who have historically been disproportionately impacted.
Right.
Something like that, broadening it out a little bit. So it's not, I don't have to have been arrested
Exactly.
unfairly. Because also the way it's written, you could argue, let's say I was not in this case, but let's say I had been arrested unjustly, I could qualify, although I'm clearly not from a disadvantaged community.
Right. Yeah. We had talked about, we're trying to say people who've been incarcerated and have struggled to make up for that economically, and or people who come from BIPOC communities where we know there was a vastly disproportionate and sort of institutionalized discrimination and criminalization in those communities. That's what I thought our intent was. And this still feels really broad or just really confusing.
Yeah, I think you're right about the intent.
I think if you said just what Keisha said, so for individuals of communities that have historically been disproportionately impacted by cannabis prohibition, because the thing is that, and I'm guessing, or that at some point, sometime soon, either the legislature or the board is going to recommend to you kind of a fleshing out of what this means. I mean, the board's going to have to figure this term out anyway. And I always thought that this term, because it's used in the existing law, was something that the board was going to detail out in rule and be part of the process. But you can have, I think if you add, for individuals of communities who have historically been disproportionately impacted, and then I'll pull up, for some reason I can't pull it up right now, just technical issue, but I'll pull it up where it exists in other places in Act 164, and I'll email it to you. And then that way, especially for Senator Rahm, if you are interested in just adding that of communities to places in existing law to make that consistent with this, then I drop those in as an additional amendment, either as an individual or as part of the committee's recommendation.
Right.
I think you're correct, is that, I mean, the issue is that I think some people do have concerns talking about individuals who themselves have been impacted.
Mm-hmm.
The people who may not, or they're, may weren't incarcerated or arrested for something or something, but there's obviously impacts on them because it's literally their community, or it's their family, or they're part of a racial group, or whoever it is that is impacted. So I get what you're saying there, and I realize it's a tricky issue because everybody's wanting to do the right thing and be inclusive, but not be so broad that nobody knows what we're talking about. So is it just to add for now, so that it would read for individuals of communities who have historically been disproportionately impacted? Does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, that gets at more of the communities of color. It doesn't get at the individual who was incarcerated and may have been set back in life, who is white or some, so I don't know.
Right. So I can say individuals or individuals of communities. So I could have both.
Could you say, or people who were previously incarcerated with a cannabis charge?
A conviction.
I think we're talking about individuals from that category and groups of people where we know their entire community was harmed and lost resources and lost access to these kinds of legal opportunities to engage in this market because of racial discrimination. I think and so one is a very individual, yes, this person didn't suffer from institutionalized discrimination, but they were set back in life because they were incarcerated because of marijuana. And these were folks who were set back as a community because of the racialized nature of incarceration.
Yeah, so you could have the community piece, and then you could say something about individuals who are directly impacted, or something like that, and just focus on the individuals.
Okay, so you can't say who were previously incarcerated.
I don't know. There's something about that makes me feel like by being that specific without going through and thinking of all the circumstances,
I think that makes
raised over time. It might be
too narrow.
It might be too narrow. I don't know, but it makes me a little uncomfortable that maybe you're unintentionally keeping somebody out that you want to be considered.
I thought we were trying to use like the Benning rule, where it was like one thing to be arrested and another thing to be incarcerated or something. But that was kind of the example that
right.
Is, some people have been a lot of young people get arrested for this. And if they have different legal representation, there's a really big difference between who goes to jail and who has the sort of means to carry on with their lives.
Well, you don't need to say have been incarcerated, but you could say previously convicted of
arrest.
I would leave it more general. I would not go down that road.
I would say negatively impacted or something like that. Unjustly negatively impacted. I wouldn't be too specific.
Yeah.
I do think you should, at this point, without this is such a big discussion, I think you should be a little more general just at this point. I think it's going to, over time, it's going to get refined. But my concern is thinking about, and again, just like what Keisha was talking about is, so, two people get arrested for the same crime and they have different backgrounds, different resources, different, let's say it's a young person, different parental involvement, things like that. It might not be that it, you could take the conviction out of it, and my kid is I'm all over that, right? I'm a lawyer. I know the criminal justice system. I'm hiring a lawyer. I'm getting my kid out of that. You have another child who maybe doesn't have the parental support at home. They don't have financial resources. They don't show up for the arraignment. Then there's a arrest warrant put out for them. Then they get conditions of release set because they didn't show up for the arraignment, and then they violate the conditions of release. And then I don't need to explain the whole criminal system to you, but you have circumstances like that where somebody may get in a whole lot of mess that really is hard and disadvantages them, but maybe there's not ever any conviction, but the failure to appear and the violation of conditions and all that other kind of stuff winds up having a significant impact on them. So I think you just want to give some room there for the board to be able to flesh that out a little more.
Yeah. Well, as we have this discussion, and I feel like this captures some of the intent of what I haven't been here for past intent conversations. So what you just named, Michelle, is exactly what I'm intending, that there's just a really big difference between how people are treated in the judicial system.
Sure.
Right.
That results in a vastly different.
Right. And also, just so you know, is that in terms of cannabis possession, nobody gets incarcerated in Vermont for that.
Haven't for several years.
You're right. I mean, maybe somebody has been or is now, but it's, there's other charges. Maybe they found cannabis on someone when they were arresting them for a violation of an APO, right? And so the misdemeanor possession gets tacked on, but that's not really the reason they're incarcerated. And so I haven't checked lately, but I have pretty consistently over the last few years checked with the crime. I can't ever remember their changing name, the crime research group that kind of helps us with data. And each time I've checked over the last several years, there's been no one incarcerated for cannabis possession. Like a standalone charge, or like the reason why they are there is because of possession.
I get that. What I didn't think we were doing was making it specific to Vermont in any way, that they could have been set back by this kind of
sure.
In all of the country, which has been vastly different, depending on which state.
I know that's a good point. Yeah. I wasn't thinking of that.
I don't think anywhere in the bill we say it had to be related to Vermont, because a lot of people come here because they're like, wow, people are nicer here, and less likely to convict you of this kind of charge if they had a bad experience somewhere else. Right.
Okay, so I'll tweak that stuff, and I'll email. I'll think about the ways to, because I won't be able to see you before Senate Judiciary takes this stuff up. I think what I'll do is, I don't know what I'll do.
If you just do any of the drafting changes we've talked about and send it to Jeanette, she'll be the one presenting it with you tomorrow in Senate Judiciary.
Do you think she's going to be back tomorrow?
You know what?
Allison thinks so.
Let me just give her a ring and see how she's feeling. Oh, I'll put myself on mute and see how she.
But Michelle, if Jeanette's not here tomorrow, can you just present it to the committee?
Sure. Yeah.
We don't need to be there.
No.
Okay.
No. But I mean, the only issue there is when I was telling them about some of the other things that you had already decided on, say, well, why did they do that? Or why do they want to do that? And
right.
I can explain, from my perspective, what I heard from you, but I don't,
Well, I trust you. I think that'd be fine.
Okay.
I mean, just because the bill they have to vote it out tomorrow, right?
They do. And they are, waiting to get your recommendations, and then Senate Ag is working on some stuff too. And
Right.
They're going to have me back tomorrow morning to work on some recommendations for Senate Judiciary as well. So
It's been all cannabis all day for me and Brian,
Oh, right. I forgot.
because we sit on ag.
Right, I wasn't with you guys this morning.
Was that this morning? Jeez, I'm crow.
I know. My days just completely blend together lately. So, okay. So I was just trying to go back to the highlighted. I think so. We've got that taken care of, and then the date you decided on October 15th. And the positions is just, again, something I'll take a look at what Allison said with respect to S79, and I'll get the information from JFO about just confirmation that it is 3, I think classified full-time positions, but I'm not sure. And then I'll add that language. And then what I'll do is then send that off to y'all as soon as I can get that drafted up. And I'll send it to the whole committee, and then I'm happy to present it tomorrow if Jeanette's not back.
Yeah, she's still pretty wiped out. I spoke to Bill. She is, so I would just suggest you send it to her, whatever you get, and just let her know what our plan is. And then if she's up to it, you guys will do it together. And if not, you're going to go for it.
Sure. Yep. And I think, as you've said many times here, this bill's still got a lot of places to go, and there's a long road. So there's lots of places you can tweak it as while it's still in the Senate.
Yep. And
Good.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
before we wrap up, I know Virginia Renfrew's been waiting, sitting patiently, listening to this. I have no idea if you have any comments you want to make, Virginia.
No, thanks for the invite. I think it all looks great.
Okay. All right. If there's no more questions or comments, I'm more than willing to adjourn the meeting.